It was a major escalation in the Vietnam War. Captain Red McDaniel was headed for his target when his plane was hit. On fire and heading down, he and his navigator ejected. He landed, crushing 2 vertebrae in his back. He was paralyzed, but still able to make contact with aircraft overhead. As he lay in the jungle, he thought he would be rescued within the hour. But 26 hours later, the enemy came to get him.
They took me to the en route to Hanoi, which was about 2 days away, stopped at 2 camps to put me on exhibit. And the people would come in and look at me and throw rocks. And then I went to the Hanoi Hilton, where I went in, and I was kind of a relief to be there because I was moving in with friends who I'd known years before who were shot down before me. Well, I went through 2 weeks of initial torture and interrogation, tortured for military information, for which I can understand. But at the end of 2 weeks, I was allowed to take my first bath. And they took me into a place we called Heartbreak Hotel. I had a rusty pipe up, bent over, no shower head, and had a stool that I could sit on because I could not walk. And they sat me down for my first bath in 2 weeks in the tropics. And I looked straight ahead, and right at the eye level in front of me, somebody had written "Smile, you" on candid camera. And from that, I got a boost.
We knew that he had gotten out of a plane and that he had landed on the ground and that he had talked to the planes overhead. So we knew that he was probably alive and probably in a POW camp.
And I also remember being at a very young age, tell me the truth, don't sugarcoat it. I want to know what it is, if it's good, if it's bad, but tell me the truth. Don't give me a false hope.
For 3 silent years, the McDaniel family waited for news. Was Captain McDaniel dead or alive? They looked for answers wherever they could.
Anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War.
There was a lot of the anti-war movement. And many times when people would go over to Vietnam, go to Hanoi, they would visit, particularly those within the anti-war movement, would visit the prisoner of war camps. And they would come back with footage, pictures. And I would go down with my mom. We would go down to Naval Intelligence, and we would go through those photographs and the footage and try to find him in a crowd somewhere.
You forget the good life. And for me, I could concentrate on survival, realizing that I had a strong family back home. My wife, Dorothy, was waiting for me, would take care of the 3 children, so I could focus on survival, and that was what kept me alive. The one thing the enemy can't take, though, is the will to believe, your faith.
The years went by. The prisoners of war developed their own communications code, communicating 6 to 7 hours a day. Red kept everyone's hopes up.
I'm an optimistic person. The guys would tap down the wall, a little signal, and they would say, "Red, we're going to go home." And my goal was 2 months, time and time again, 2 months. Well, in 6 years, I lost a lot of credibility, but that's what they wanted to hear. I'd been there 2 years, doing torture, no sleep, 7 days, 7 nights, beaten daily with a fan belt. And the body goes downhill very fast on half rations. So the only thing I had left was that will that says, hang on. I had nothing else left to give. And the lesson I learned is that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is simply the presence of faith.
After 3 years, the McDaniel family received word that Captain McDaniel was alive and was being held as a prisoner of war.
It was relief knowing that he was alive. Well, the last thing we heard, he was alive. But it was also it was harder because now we could visualize him in a POW camp rather than wonder if he was alive.
Another 3 years passed as the war went on. Then in 1973, after 6 years as a POW, a peace accord was negotiated, and McDaniel and others being held were released and going home.
They load us aboard the 141s, and you don't really get excited until you leave the coastline of Vietnam. And it's a term in the Navy, when we hit the beach, feet dry, we hit the water, feet wet. And when the C-141 went feet wet, there was a G jump in the aircraft. That's the first time we could really get excited about it. And we went to the Philippines, where we were met by thousands of people. And it's hard to explain the magnitude of the number of people that were there in the middle of the night to welcome us home. And we received a great homecoming.
I can remember seeing the plane land and then taxiing down the tarmac. And you know your father's on this airplane. And there's this anticipation that's indescribable.
I was worried, what's it going to be like? Having been gone for 7 years, a year of combat and 6 years as a POW.
After his return, Captain McDaniel resumed active duty. He eventually told his story in his book, Scars and Stripes, and he became active in trying to find those still missing in Vietnam. To this day, he credits his optimism and faith that helped him survive 6 brutal years as a POW for the man he is today.
I grew from my adversity in Vietnam. And I learned that when the storms come, you don't wait for the storm to pass. You learn how to dance in the rain. And that enabled me to survive, was being able to face the fact that any life has adversity.